Say my name. I am awake. I am the danger. I am the one who knocks.
Welcome back to another episode of Breaking into Breaking Bad with Clifford and Caleb Humphrey. Today we are going to break into Season 5, Episode 12, Rabid Dog. Cabes, please, you know what to do.
I'd be honored. If you guys recall, the last episode ended with Jesse kind of going crazy with the gasoline in Walt's house. So this one starts off with Walt arriving to the house, knowing full well that Jesse knows what Walt has been up to, and he freaks out. He crawls over the fence, tries to sneak into his house, and thinking Jesse was going to be there, but finds out that he's not there, has no idea where he went, and now has to deal with the after effects of his house filled with gasoline. And so he goes on to kind of the old Walt that we saw in past seasons, where he was constantly coming up with lies to manipulate stories. And so he comes up with a story to more a ruse to trick Skyler and Walt Jr. of what happened, and convinces them to go to a hotel for the night so they don't get the fumes of the gasoline. And then we find out that Hank had stopped Jesse from lighting the house on fire, and had taken him back to his house basically to turn him. And he does that. He gets Jesse to start working with him, and he brings Gomi in on it too. And Jesse basically just spills the beans about what they had been up to for so long. And he basically tells them that it's like, no matter how smart you guys think you are, Mr. White is smarter than you and luckier than you. And they come up with a plan to try to get Walt to kind of come out of the shadows and confess with Jesse wearing a wire. And at the end of the episode, Jesse turns around, comes back to the van, and says that he has another way to get Walt. And at that point, we see Walt call Todd and says that he has another job for his uncle, which we can only assume means that he's ready to end his fatherly figure relationship that he had with Jesse, because he's gotten to a point where he has to put him down. So that's kind of the gist of the episode.
Very good. So the title of this episode, Rabid Dog. Pretty obvious, I think, if you know your classic Disney references. There's a scene where Walt and Skyler are talking, and no, it's Saul. Saul and Walt are talking, and Saul just says, regarding Jesse, maybe it's time. He was good. He was a good guy, but maybe it's time to put him down. He's gone kind of crazy. And if you remember the movie Old Yeller, story about a boy and his dog, and dog gets rabies and has to be put down. And so that's Jesse to Saul. And he's suggested this kind of thing before. He suggested that they do this, I think, with Jesse in the past. And every time Walt says no. Saul has even suggested that about Hank, and Walt has said no. So it shows the kind of thinking that Saul has, which is very Machiavellian. And I don't know if it's a weakness in Walt's part, where he plays the villain in so many ways, but in these kinds of ways he refuses. It's like he has a kind of loyalty. He has a code all of a sudden, a code of honor that he won't break.
Right.
So we'll get into all that. But that's the title, Rabid Dog. So the intro, as you alluded, the intro is Walt discovering his house with the carpet soaked with gasoline. and him breaking in, trying to find Jesse, who he thinks is still there because the car is parked in his front yard. And he doesn't find Jesse, but the car is open, like the door is open, and I think he sees a CD with what looks like cocaine on it. So he's just thinking Jesse got high and went crazy. And anyway, that's the intro. So it's one of those intros where it's the next scene from where we left off. It just kind of picks up immediately. In fact, seconds afterward. So we see Walt calls Jesse and leaves a voicemail and says, I want to fix this, sleep it off, and then call me. So he's assuming he just got high and changed his mind and then, I don't know, ran off or something, left his car. So maybe you can help me with this, Cabes. So Walt is desperate to try to make everything look fine and normal. And so he gets a locksmith to come and fix the doors because Jesse had kicked it open. And the locksmith guy says, you want us to rekey the locks. That's normally what we do in these situations. And Walt says, no, don't rekey the locks. Is it because he doesn't want Skylar to know that he had the locks and the door rebuilt and all this? Is he trying to minimize all that?
He wanted to fix everything to make it look like nothing had happened. Because right after that, the carpet cleaning people were in there. And he goes, wait a second. No, I could still smell it. You got to go over this again. And he's like, listen, I'd love to take your money, but there's absolutely nothing we can do to this carpet. It's soaked to your floorboards. We're going to have to rip up all the carpet and everything. And it was at that point, then Walt starts thinking, okay, I can't hide this. I got to come up with a different solution. And that's when he starts pouring gasoline over his clothes. He puts gasoline in his car, and he puts the gas tank in his garbage can. And then he's like, no, I got to put it in my neighbor's garbage can because Skylar will see it there. And so it very similar to how he used to be, where he was constantly thinking of different lies to manipulate. And you see when Skylar and Walt Jr. come in, they both are calling BS on this right away. And Walt Jr. a little bit kind of, because he's like, no, you passed out. That's what happened. You passed out and you did something to get gas here. And Skylar, fully aware of what's going on with his life activities and everything, knows that something's not right. And she just kind of goes along with it. But yeah, to answer your question, at that point he wanted it to just be completely fixed and they would none the wiser.
I see. So Skylar could come home, use her old key, and nothing would be any different.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. So yeah. So as you said, he reverts to an older form of himself, where we've seen him just be at a place where he's completely confident, and he'll just be straight up honest with Skylar. Like when he came home and his clothes were dirty, and she said, "What you doing?" Or "What are you doing?" He's like, "I'm going to go rob a train." Like he doesn't even care.
Right.
But that's not where he's at now. And I don't know if there's any rhyme or reason to, like, he definitely doesn't seem like he's Heisenberg in that moment. He seems like he's old Walt.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas Heisenberg is the very confident, I don't care what you think, this is what I'm doing, and this is what I did.
Right.
So it's definitely that two kind of personalities. And he ruins, like gasoline, like it doesn't come out very easily. He puts it in his car. Like that's going to be there for a while. That stench.
Yeah, he had to go along with the whole thing about, like, when she first came in, he goes, well, what happened is I should sue somebody. I was at the pump and
Right.
it malfunctioned and it just went all over me. And in my days, I just threw my clothes on the ground and it just soaked all through the carpet. Like he hasn't gotten better at all with his lies, probably because he's
Right.
been in practice.
Yeah, good point. So they go to stay in a hotel for the night, and Walter Jr. thinks it's a good time, and Skylar is just playing along. Like she knows that the whole thing is made up. And Walt even makes it worse when he arranges to meet Saul in the parking lot of the hotel, and we learn afterward he's down there for a few minutes, and then he comes back and says, "Oh, I was getting ice, but the ice machine didn't work, or I had to go down the hall or something." Anyway, his excuses don't really make a lot of sense. And Skylar just says, "How's Saul?" It was really, really funny.
Yeah.
And Walt's kind of caught dead in his tracks. It's like, how would I know? Are you spying on me? She's like, "Yeah, I just looked out the window. Wasn't that hard?" So that's when Saul says, here's the deal. What are we going to do when we find Jesse? And, how are we going to make him see reason? And at this point, we get to see, I think, Walt's fatherly figure, I guess, his fatherly love in a way for Jesse kind of come out.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, I guess when he's in his Heisenberg state, he's ruthless. And when he's in his Walt state, he's, I don't know what's the right word, pitiful in the sense that he's full of pity.
Yeah, he was making excuses basically for him, and it was like this was just an accident, a misunderstanding. He didn't realize what he was doing. And this part was pretty incredible because we see Skylar kind of open up in a sense that we hadn't seen her before, because she's like, "Listen, we've made this awful tape. We've done these awful things. You need to handle this." And she's almost reverting to a Saul old Yeller type of scenario where she's like, "You have to handle him, Jesse.
Right.
You have to deal with this." And we haven't kind of seen that before. Normally she's always like very timid about the whole thing.
Yeah, she's very Heisenberg-esque in that moment. Well, I think it's also interesting to note when Walt says, "We just need to find Jesse, and we just need to reason with him. We need to make him see reason." And that's straight out of season 1. He's a businessman. Remember the way he deals with Crazy Eight, or Tuco.
Negotiate.
We'll just lay it all out, pros and cons, and he will be a rational actor and do the thing that's in his greatest interest to maximize profits and security. But that's clearly not where Jesse is. Jesse is drunk on rage and resentment toward Walt right now. He's not interested in listening to reason, because for him, reason just means getting Walt to stop. So, yeah, I would say Walt's not in a good place at this episode.
No, not at all.
And like you said, Skylar seems to see things a little bit more clearly, as ruthless as that is. And it's interesting though that she still won't use the language of violence. She says you just need to deal with him.
Right.
She can't bring herself to say it. She can say it that way because they both know what she's talking about, but she still can't really just be explicit about it.
Yep.
But she says to him, "You can't just talk to this person. You can't reason with him." And then she seems to have a kind of interesting way of calculating. She says, "We've come this far for us. What's one more?" And you're thinking, wait, what is she counting? What one more what?
Yeah. And she doesn't follow up when he said he's mad about something that I did that I had to do for good reason, and I just need to explain that to him. She didn't say, "Well, what was it?" or anything. She doesn't care at that point. She's just thinking for her family and for herself, because they made that up. She says, like, "We made that awful video. Like, there's no turning back. We have to move forward. Do what you do, whatever it is, handle it."
Yeah, it's interesting. She has kind of, one of the ways that she has kind of survived is by, ignorance is bliss. She's like, "I don't want to know about it. I don't want to know about it. like, where are you getting all this money, or why your, hands are bloody, or why, you've got dirt on your boots. I don't know where to know where you've been. And so she has really no idea how many people Walt has killed.
Right.
She knows that he's killed at least Gus Fring. And so when she says, "What's one more?" I guess she's thinking, I don't know how many people you've killed, but you've killed some. And what's one more?
Yeah.
All right. Well, so then interestingly, the scene shifts back and we get to see what happened in the interim. And this is where we see how Hank intervened right at the last minute when Jesse was about to light the whole house on fire. And Hank talks him into his car and says, let's go downtown and let's get Hank, or get Walt. And they're gone for seconds before Walt shows up, and the whole thing. I mean, it's very close call.
Right.
How soon everything kind of happened. And Hank says to Jesse, he says, "You want to burn him down? Let's do it together." And that's when Jesse says he can't keep getting away with it, which is a pretty memorable
that scene, just
scream.
Aaron Paul, who plays Jesse, I mean, that was a really traumatic scene for him, because everything was coming to the forefront for him right then, and he just kind of let it all out, and it was pretty powerful.
Right. So what do you make of this scene with Marie and her psychologist? It's not clear if she's wearing purple or black. I can't tell. It's a very dark purple.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means, but
because the last discussion she had with Hank was basically him saying, "That was it. You ruined us because of you took money from Walt." And that was the nail in the coffin. That was the last thing. And so in her mind, they lost. Walt won. There's nothing else they can do. And so it was just her handling that response and not really knowing what to do, honestly.
Yeah, that's a good point. It shows in a way like the cruelty of Hank, because he should know how sort of frail and unstable she is.
Mm-hmm.
And yet by guilting her like that, she gets suicidal. She says what was she Googling? What's a toxin that she can take that won't cause pain, but it'll kill her. And so, yeah, I think maybe that's all there is to it, is just that comment that Hank made really spun Marie down to this low place, and that's where she is. Now, though, Jesse's at Hank and Marie's house, which is a funny kind of situation. If you remember, I mean, their history, right, is pretty
Right.
complicated and convoluted. And so Hank gives Jesse sleeping pills and knocks him out, and then he gets the phone and he gets to hear Walt's voicemail that he left when he says, "Hey, sleep it off. Call me when you get up." So to me, I mean, that's not proof of of Walt's guilt, but I don't know how Walt would have explained that in a courtroom. Like, what are you doing calling this guy?
Right. It just would have been another piece of evidence that he could have used against him as their relationship.
Yeah. And then, of course, Hank's ready with his camcorder to get the whole confession. And he thinks that that's how he's going to bring Walt down. And Gomi's there and talking to him. And Jesse, like you said, is still kind of depressed. And he's not convinced that anything that he has to say will be sufficient evidence to convict Walt in a court of law. And I'm not, I guess I don't really understand. I'm not a lawyer, but I would think that testimony, backed up with certain things that Jesse could show, like drive here, drive there, show these things, that they could have made sense. But something about this episode is we're kept in the dark about certain things. So we don't know what Jesse's thinking, for example, when he's walking up to Walt with the wire, and then he stops and he throws the whole plan up and he says, I have a better way. I mean, what would have been better than just getting the confession on the wire and that's it? We have to just trust that Jesse knows what he's talking about, but he's not really the most competent person that has deserved our trust for that kind of thing in the past.
Well, remember, he also thought Walt was trying to kill him, especially for what he did. And so when he walked up and he saw that guy sitting there, he assumed that was a hired hand. And that's when he was running away and made that call to him. You're right. We don't know at this point what his better way is. Yeah.
And you're right. Jesse tells Hank and Gomi, if I do this, he'll shoot me. As if it could be any kind of comfort. Hank says, well, we'll have it all on tape.
Yeah, I know. Well, that part was pretty important too. His conversation when Jesse leaves to go to the bathroom and he's talking to Gomi about it. And Gomi's like, yeah, he could shoot him. He's like, well, then that's just better for us. It's like, what do I care? He's a junkie. He in his mind, he still doesn't like Jesse because Jesse was his partner through this whole thing. And Jesse, we assume, just confessed to everything because Hank had asked Gomi, he's like, well, what do you think? He's like, I believe him. But he's right. We don't have anything that could stick right now. But ultimately, he just wants Walt because he knows Walt's Heisenberg and the brains behind everything, and he wants blood.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, that shows that even Hank here is Machiavellian. So we've seen Walt be that way, we've seen Skylar be that way, and now we're seeing Hank be that way. Just complete manipulation and complete disregard for care for the person that he's pretending to have care for.
Right.
And using him for his own purposes. And that to me kind of confirms that Skylar's instincts were right. That I think it was his emotions were still or his motives were still mixed, but that a lot of Hank's concern for her was really concern for himself. Mm-hmm. So it ends, like you said, with Walt calling Todd and telling him that he has another hit job for his uncle. So we can only assume that means Jesse. Mm-hmm. Hence the title of the episode again, Rabid Dog, Old Yeller, put him down.
There was one moment when they were at the hotel and Walt was sitting outside by the pool and Walt Jr. comes out and they kind of have an emotional impulse. Yeah. At least Walt Jr. does because he's scared of the cancer coming back. And you wonder if that pulled on the heartstrings of Walt at all. Like, has there ever been a time since this whole thing started where he regrets all the things that he did, or he's always been fight or flight? He's never thought about, well, all this, it was really bad. The consciousness is still not kicking in. He's not trying to think of anything else. And you would think after that embrace that he had with Walt Jr. about him not being around anymore, it would have pulled on some heartstrings or anything, but it seems like it was just really one-sided coming from Walt Jr.'s side.
Yeah, and maybe that's what we were supposed to see in that is how hardened Walt is. And so despite the fact that he's not Heisenberg right now, because that's a different kind of hardened, or I should say, maybe the hardened heart of Heisenberg has just bled over to Walt now. So Walt still has all the insecurities of the old Walt, but now he also has the hard-heartedness of the Heisenberg, and it's just that can't dissuade him from,
right,
doing what he thinks he needs to do.
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for hanging in there with us. We appreciate it. Hope you like this episode. As always, feel free to like it, share, reach out, share your comments, and hang on to your seats because we're getting close to the end of this whole show, y'all. So we will be back next time very soon when we break into the next episode of Breaking Bad.